Good morning, everyone. Happy Friday, and we're back with another hardware podcast. I'm Omar with my good friend Jackson, and we're ready to talk another week of FCS football as we draw near to the close.
Yeah, we're near Selection Sunday, and it's hard to believe it's already April, honestly. But with the end of March Madness, and no one cares about the Masters, so let's get into some good football.
That's a bold statement for sure. I mean,
Okay, not no one, but like no one that enjoys football. I feel like. Yeah, I'll
that's true.
stop. We're already getting off track.
I mean, didn't you live in Georgia for a time,
I
Jackson?
did, I did.
That's a shame, man. That's a shame that you
Missed
said that,
opportunity.
knowing that, man. It's a shame. Uh, we're going to take a little bit of a different approach with our awards races. As it's near to the close, the time for sleepers is not, I mean, if they're in the race, they're in the race. Otherwise, I mean, it's hard for sleepers to emerge now this late. But starting off with our Walter Payton talk, Jackson, who's in your top five, 4 or 5, and why?
Okay, so first, I've got Cameron Ward actually as my first. The quarterback from Incarnate Word. In 4 games played, he's over 1,500 yards, 20 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. You can tack on the 2 rushing touchdowns. Coming off of, I believe, back-to-back 6 touchdown performances. It's just hard to ignore him. He's heating up and in the most important time.
Yeah, so I have Schmid number one, and
Okay.
in a way, so 2 weeks from now, or not 2 weeks, I guess the 17th of April, Sam Houston's going to play Incarnate Word for what might be a playoff elimination game. Well, not even playoff elimination. One team's going to win the conference. One team's going to get an at-large, very likely. But I can see if Ward beats Schmid, then he'll be up top. But I do agree that Ward's up there for sure. I have Schmid number one, even though on Thursday night, the Thursday night spotlight, the Pentatonics didn't help him. He had I mean, he struggled against Northwestern State, just like I guess Lindsey Scott and Nichols did. Like Nichols played Northwestern State. It was a close game when people didn't
It
expect it to be.
was. It was much closer than people expected.
So I mean, give the Demons their credit. They play up to competition, and it showed there. As I think the score is 24-9. It was a 24-9 game, closer than expected. So it might have hurt Schmid's chances a bit, but I still have him number one on the strength of that dominant win against Nicholls State. But make no mistake, April 17th, Incarnate Word, Sam Houston State is pretty much a Walter Payton elimination game, I think.
Yeah, that is, and that's something we're gonna have to talk about on next week's podcast for sure. Because that might even be the game of the week. I haven't looked too much into next week's schedule, but that'll be for all the marbles. Maybe if only for the Walter Payton Award. I'm gonna go. Actually, I've still got Lindsey Scott as my number two. Now they are coming off of a very disappointing loss this past week. But I mean, he's played 6 games. He has 7 touchdowns, which is an average of 3 touchdowns a game, or almost. He's got 3 interceptions, 1,400 yards, and 5 rushing touchdowns. You compare that to Eric Schmid. In 4 games played, he's got 12 touchdowns, which is an average of 3 touchdowns a game. He has 5 interceptions, which is 2 more interceptions in 2 less games played, and 1 less rushing touchdown. So when you compare the stats face to face, and I know he beat Scott handily head to head, but I've statistically and as far as like a wow factor, I've honestly still got Lindsey Scott going in. And yes, it was a disappointing loss, but he didn't throw an interception or even turn the ball over. That loss was not his fault. So that, and it's not like they're like a 2-3 team. Like they're 4-2. They're not terrible. So I've still got Scott as my number two.
So that's where I disagree with you, man, because I got it like just a stat line 14-35 for 186 against Sam Houston. It's not like he was going blow for blow with Eric Schmidt. He went 14 for 35.
But that was by far his worst game of the year, and I know it was head to head. But he hasn't had a loss nearly as bad or a game nearly as bad. Like it's either been blowouts or a tough loss that wasn't his fault. So it's hard to blame. Wins aren't a quarterback stat, and that's like
Okay.
multiple podcast series debating that, so we're not going to get too much into that. But I'm just saying, like, I don't know. I've still got him as number 2.
Okay. I mean, I will say this. I mean, this award goes generally to contenders, which plays into my next pick, Eric Barrier. 1,883 yards in 4 games for or I guess 5 games, for Eastern Washington, 16 touchdowns, 6 picks, as Eastern Washington looks primed for the playoff. He's putting out numbers out there out west, and maybe by some miracle, if Schmidt and Ward trail off by the end of the year, I think the award is Barrier to the taking. But I got Schmidt, Barrier, and Ward just like you have Ward up there, like 1, 2, and 3 in very close contention.
Yeah, I can agree with that. I've got Schmidt as my number 3. I don't dislike Schmidt. I just think Scott's a hair above him. And then mine to round out for number 4, I've got Barrier because you can't not put him on the list. In 5 games played, 16 touchdowns. I don't like the 6 interceptions, but he's still at like 1,800 yards, which is like 300 yards above everyone else. So.
Yeah, for sure. Like it is a quarterback's award, and those are like systems that you think of, quarterback friendly systems. At least Sam Houston State and Eastern Washington. When you think of Cooper Kupp, guys like that. My next guy, I actually have a running back at number 3, and it's not Otis Weah, but it's Quay Holmes out of East Tennessee State, who's quietly having a great year out of the SoCon. They just beat VMI, the toast of the conference. And Holmes has 551 yards on 108 carries in 5 games. He also returns kicks, 326 kick return yards. Against VMI, he really had just a workhorse performance with 29 carries, 135 yards. So I think if there's a running back to win it, it's not Weah, because Weah only has 76 carries in 5 games, doesn't get the ball much. But Holmes, like the Buccaneers feed Holmes, and they're primed for a playoff berth. And at large, as we'll talk about later with bracketology, the at large field is pretty thin. It's thin pickings, and with the MEAC not getting it open, not getting a playoff spot, a spot just opened up. But I got Quay Holmes at running back as being like the one guy that can potentially win it at that position.
And I think we want to clarify, we're big Otis Weah fans. Like, we do not fault him. We both think North Dakota should have been handing the ball off, especially in the game against the Bison. So we love Weah on this podcast. We just want to clarify that, I think, because it's not his fault. He should be getting the ball more because he's their best player. With all respect to Tommy.
Oh yeah, of course. Who's your next guy, Jackson?
My last guy was Barrier.
Oh, Barrier. Okay.
Yeah, with the 1,800 yards and 16 TDs. Okay,
so for me, it's like the quarterbacks, you got everyone else. So my next 2 guys, I got Jacob Harris for VMI, 684 yards in 6 games at receiver, just great numbers. And again, it's like these quarterbacks have their off games, with the exception of Barrier, it seems. So, you just never know. And he plays for VMI, one of the best stories of the spring, so that adds to it. And my last guy in my rankings, I have Tyler Phelps out of Davidson. And the stats aren't eye-popping, but he's an option quarterback. And I love my triple option. They were on the gun option out there in North Carolina. And he's got 562 passing yards and 6 touchdowns in 5 games. I know the passing stats don't wow. And he's got 208 rushing yards and 1 touchdown. So a true dual threat. But for me, it's like 2021, 20-year anniversary, Eric Crouch's Heisman. I'm getting kind of Eric Crouch vibes here, where it's like you have a contending team, not exactly a brand, but it's like, why not give it to an option quarterback? And I know this is a bitter topic for you, Jackson, but I want to know your thoughts on that.
I'm not the biggest option offense promoter as my good friend Omar is, so I can respect it, but I don't have him in my top 4. I'll say that politely.
He's like number 5. He's on the edge for me. Like,
that's fair. So you don't either. I don't know that I would have him at 5 either. But yeah, I respect that.
Well, if you think about it too, like, I think his Walter Payton moment was that win against San Diego, where he had his stats weren't great, but he was efficient, and that's the thing. Pulling up his stats for that game, I think he was like 8 for 10, or like he had a high completion percentage. Pulling it up right now, I should have wrote it down, but he went 10 for 15, 189 yards and 3 touchdowns, and also had 26 rushing yards and 7 carries. So he was like efficient throwing the ball. And I think the stat was 8 of his 10 completions went for first downs or touchdowns. And San Diego had a 41 game conference winning streak. 41 game conference winning streak, and Tyler Phelps sort of like the face of that and ending that and helping Davidson end that streak and putting them in position for their first playoff berth ever, and probably the first postseason berth in general since the 1969 Tangerine Bowl. I mean, I think that deserves merit, and why not show some love for the option in a shortened season? Everyone's playing a shortened season, so why not?
Yeah, that's about as good an argument as you can make for it. I just my thing, and we're getting slightly off topic with this. I remember you and Marshall did a podcast on why don't these teams do the option more, because it works and it's pretty simple to do. And my thing with the option is that and you guys should go back and listen to that if you haven't listened to Omar and Marshall's podcast on that already. Like the option, the whole point of it is that it's difficult to defend, and like your typical defense, like once teams start moving to that and that becomes more commonplace, then guys will figure it out, and then it's not difficult to defend anymore. That's just my opinion of like, once it becomes common, then it's no longer going to have the effect of why the team switched to it. And that's just my opinion. So like, I don't know. You tell me your thoughts on that.
I mean, I agree, but people are scared of the option. Why do you think Kenny Matololo hasn't been drawn away yet from Navy, or Coach Monken here at West Point? I think it's because the fans. The fans think, oh, we're just going to run the ball all the time. I mean, it's all casual fans. So I don't think that'll happen in the modern day when so many teams run it. But there's teams that have focused on a run heavy approach and with a lot of option elements, of course, with the spread, but even more so with like the power aspect, having like 2 backs in the backfield and running option. But I digress with that topic. I think we should move on to our Buck Buchanan.
I just had a random thought in my head pop up. Can you imagine if Tennessee traded for Lamar Jackson and then ran the option?
Oh gosh, yeah, no, I mean, it would be lethal.
Move on to Buck Buchanan before we get too much into that.
Yeah, it would be lethal for sure.
Oh my gosh, that sounds dangerous. All right, I'll go with my number one for Buck Buchanan. I've got Jack McDonald, the linebacker from Austin. He in 6 games played, 52 tackles, so very productive. 8.5 tackles for loss, 2.5 which were sacks, a pick 6 and 2 forced fumbles. Just too much production all over the place. Not to put him at number one, in my opinion.
I think I'm going to choose another OVC linebacker or linebackers interchangeable at number one. I got Nicario Harper as like the top guy, and Marshall Clark, teammates on Jacksonville State, close behind. Harper's got 71 tackles in 10 games, 3 interceptions. He's got a 64-yard fumble return touchdown, 1.5 tackles for loss. Really just like the face of that defense. And then Clark wreaks havoc in the backfield with 59 tackles, 7 tackles for loss, 1.5 sacks, one interception. And I think it helps that they're 8-2. They played a lot of games, and really it's like the defense is just leading that team because the offense struggles at times. They lost to Austin Peay 13-10 through no fault of the defenses. But when I see those guys, it's like they have 10 games, they have more games under their belt, they've sustained the play for a longer amount of time. So either one of those guys are my number one out of Jacksonville State.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I'm still in one of your guys for my number two. I've got Connor Riddle in 6 games played, 51 tackles, 10 tackles for loss, which anytime you hit double digits and that is something to talk about, and an interception, which is kind of the icing on the cake. Productive. And I love, as much as we love like TFLs and interceptions and forced fumbles, because those are fun to talk about and those get on Sports Center, just having like 50 plus tackles is like, there's something to say for that, because that just shows like productivity. And unless you're like on like an interior defensive line that maybe you're affecting the ball with like quarterback hurries, that you should be, if you're going to win the Buck Buchanan, like you should be high up in tackles, in my opinion. So I've got Connor Riddle on that number 2.
Yeah, I have him too, and I have his teammate Stone Snyder in a similar fashion as Harper and Clark, just teammates on the same pretty solid defense. They got exposed a bit earlier in the season against Sanford and Wofford, but Snyder has 7 TFLs and 6 sacks, more sacks than Riddle, one more actually, and 55 tackles. And again, like the stats are there for them, just getting the backfield. This is a front 7 award. And BMI is one of the best stories of the spring. I sound like a broken record saying this every week, but even Bill Connolly of ESPN, formerly of SB Nation, the stats guy, has caught on to BMI, posting about visiting their page four times in a day, I think, or in the past couple of days. He tweeted about that, but I think a lot of America has VMI fever.
Can we just get like a Nichols versus VMI matchup and just like settle this debate? Because I would one of us would be silent about the other for the rest of the year. Because I love VMI's defense. You kind of love Nichols' offense, and like we should just like settle that debate. That would be sick, in my opinion. But unfortunately, we can't do that. We don't have that much power. My number 3 guy, I've got Jamani Crane. Now, I do not think he is the third best defensive player. I think he's good. I don't think he's the third best defensive player in the FCS. I think he is the third most likely to win it just because he has the most memorable, and I said this last week, yes, the most memorable play of the season, thanks to ESPN. And he is getting so much airtime in this love fest with Jackson State that everyone seems to have, which I'm not arguing. It's better than not having it with Dion there, but it's there's just so much talk around Jackson State. That's the only FCS thing ESPN is posting is related to Jackson State. It doesn't hurt that he's getting so much attention. And he has the most merit. It just sticks in voters' minds. So I'm going to go with Jamani Crane. 5 games played, 16 tackles, which I just said I want to be productive in tackling, but oh well. 4 tackles for loss, 2 sacks, and of course that one scoop and score that will be remembered for a long time.
Yeah, I think that wow factor and that exposure helps a bunch in terms of like national voters, because a lot of these games are behind paywalls, ESPN Plus, and at the same time as well. So I mean, you could access those games at a cheap price, but it's like the ESPN, just being on like big ESPN helps a lot in terms of exposure. Because
had he not done the Dion dance going into the end zone, or the Dion shuffle, whatever it's called, I don't think he would be number 3, because that's what made it like really go everywhere on Twitter and stuff, was him doing that Dion shuffle into the end zone. So, if that's all you have to do to win the Buck Buchanan, then like we're gonna start seeing like all these guys do it. I watch Connor Riddle.
Yeah, more so I think he might be a Heisman candidate for the spring. My last guy, I'm gonna put a defensive back, even though one defensive back's won it and not in the last 18 years. I got Chris Edmonds, who is really wreaking havoc in terms of turnovers and everything. He's got 37 tackles, 4 interceptions, 2 forced fumbles, and 2.5 tackles for loss. So this guy, it's like all over the place. But there aren't 11 Chris Edmonds on the field for Sanford as they've had struggles on defense, which might overshadow him along with the fact that he's a defensive back. But you just look at those stats. Like the man wreaks havoc with like 6 turnovers forced. Great.
Yeah, if it were up to me, I would put Edmonds as my number 4 guy too. Which I mean, it is up to me, but I don't think he's the fourth most likely to win it, as much as I do love what Edmonds is doing this year. I've got Mike Green, the defensive lineman from James Madison. It helps JMU being a brand. We were talking about that a little bit earlier with bracketology, but before the show. And 5 games played, 16 tackles, 7.5 tackles for loss, 2 of which were sacks. I think Green is productive. He's got the brand behind him. They still haven't lost the game despite half their games being paycheck games. I like Green a lot.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, that's just the thing. Like maybe he makes a splash in the playoffs, but I just don't think Green has enough of a resume in terms of just like amount of games played on compared to the rest of the candidates. But yeah, like He is on one of the biggest brands in FCS and James Madison, a team that, as we'll talk pretty shortly, on the merit of their brand, on the merit of their brand, they're the number one team in the country, whether that's fair or not. Which I guess is a good segue to talk about bracketology, as the playoffs are coming near. Selection Sunday is 9 days from now, and they came out. I think they came out with like the top 10. We looked at some bracketology before this, and the top 4 seeds, which usually they would get a first round bye. There would be 8 seeds in a 2014 playoff, and they get a first round bye. But it's kind of like home field advantage, and they face the weaker teams in the field regionally. So the top 4 seeds are North Dakota State, James Madison, Sam Houston State, and Weber State. So those are the favorites. But where it gets interesting is the at-large bids. So according to Hero Sports, which is what we're going off of, the at-large bids are South Dakota State, Delaware, East Washington, East Tennessee, North Dakota, and Richmond. And I think that's a pretty fair assessment, with the exception of Richmond. And I want to talk a little about the CAA, Jackson. It's like, what do you do with like all these teams that have barely played but have really, I guess, that recognition and that credit with their program success in the past?
Well, let's see. Is there any precedent for a team or a conference playing and still getting in the playoff? I'm gonna go with Ohio State for 500 there. Yeah, I mean, like, I know it's not the same brand, obviously, as Ohio State in the Big Ten, but we saw it last year, or I guess not last year, this season. Yeah, they've barely played. The most games anyone's played in the CAA is 4 games. With there are a few teams like Maine and Albany and them, but yeah, I mean, I guess you have to put them in if you're gonna put anyone in from the CAA. I guess it should be Richmond.
So, so I think this is very shades of Big Ten what's happening in the CAA, because they're doing a vote now. They had tiebreakers before, but the season's been so mangled. A lot of teams opted out just recently, and they're doing a vote now, kind of like, I guess, like how the Big Ten ADs voted to put Ohio State in the Big Ten championship. And what's kind of crazy, I guess, frustrating for other schools is you look at their resume, and James Madison's only beaten Robert Morris, who's a bottom feeder out of the Big South. They beat Morehead State, who's not having a good year, not having a good year in the Pioneer Football League, the non-scholarship conference Davidson and San Diego are in. So and then in conference, they've only beaten 1-5 Elon by 3 points, and William and Mary by 28, which, I mean, as they should. William and Mary at 1-2. But it's like, if that was any other school, they're not in. But because it's James Madison, not only are they a projected playoff team, but they're a projected number 1 seed. And it's like, and it's the same thing with Richmond too, because Richmond is 4-0, right? It's 3-0 right now. They play William and Mary this week, and so their resume would consist of a win against Elon and 2 wins against William and Mary. So pretty much 3 wins against 1-win teams. So it's like where does it stop here? It's like where does the brand name bias stop?
I would say I will say that I would rather have Richmond go in as a 16 than Holy Cross or anyone from the Patriot.
Ouch.
They played like 2 games and not go to the playoffs with that.
I do agree, but I think so. A team that I'm very compelled for their playoff case.
Sorry to interrupt. I should say the Patriot is an automatic bid. So
yeah.
Holy Cross was on that at large. It's an automatic thing. That's why they've played 2 games and scheduled to make the playoffs.
Yeah, or whoever wins a Patriot League title game next week. Holy Cross or Bucknell.
Bucknell, yeah, Bucknell.
The field's set for that one, but I am compelled for one team. So if you look at the first 6 out, and we'll put the link in the description for this video. You look at teams out, it's like Monmouth, Murray State, Incarnate Word, and Missouri State. So Monmouth, it's probably going to be the loser of the Monmouth-Kennesaw State game that gets left out, because Kennesaw State's at 4-0, 2-0 in conference. but a win over a Monmouth team that had 11 wins in 2019, or a Kennesaw State team that had 11 wins in 2019, is a solid. It's a solid win for that's going to decide the Big South first off. But again, they have a small body of work. Incarnate Word, they're projected to lose to Sam Houston State, so they'll have 2 losses: blowout loss to Nichols, and then a loss to Sam Houston State, 2 losses. Murray State, they're projected to lose to Jacksonville State, who is at 8-2, and Murray State doesn't really have any good wins. They would not have any good wins if they lose to Jackson State for the OVC title. So that's that. And then the last team was Missouri State, who hasn't made the playoffs since 1990, but you know who's coaching that team, Jackson?
I do not.
The bad boy coach of college football, Bobby Petrino.
Okay.
So he's got the Bears back on track for their first playoff bid since 1990. And they've done great in the spring, but the fall tripped them up. They went 0-3 in the fall, and they're 4-1 in the spring. So that's a team that I feel, it's like what's the merit of putting a team like Richmond in, who's only beaten 1-win teams,
Right. No, I agree. I also want to go ahead and mention that that why we're not talking about Jackson State or any from the SWAC or MEAC. It's because if you don't already know, they play in their own championship game, the Celebration Bowl. They will not be participating in the FCS playoffs, which you would think that they could just push it back 1 week and then win the Celebration and then go ahead and go on to the playoffs. But yeah, it's that's not a thing. So they're not going to be in the playoffs. Which I don't know, with all the Celebration Bowl history, would you rather have that in a shot at an actual FCS championship, or do you think that would devalue the Celebration Bowl too much?
I think that devalues the Celebration Bowl because if you look at the history of HBCU football, they had their own bowl games for sure, and that's what they want. The HBCUs are a bigger brand than most of probably all of FCS, and that the attendance records show that, the history shows that.
The possible exception of NDSU, and I think I handily say that the HBCUs have bigger brands.
I think so. I think NDSU is more of a regional brand. So in a way, I do think it would, but also too, I also want to note for the MEAC, whoever gets the last at-large bid can thank Washington, D.C. lawmakers, because they made a law against, people traveling to South Carolina or teams competing in South Carolina. So because Howard cannot play South Carolina State, the MEAC does not have a round-robin schedule. So they are disqualified from having a playoff berth, opening up an at-large bid. That's something that was talked about this week.
What did South Carolina do? What did I miss?
No, they didn't do anything. It's it was just because of a COVID risk, COVID mitigation.
Oh, okay.
They wouldn't allow them to travel.
Oh, so that's not a permanent thing. I feel like
no, it's not permanent, but it was just they had their first game canceled in Washington D.C. because they didn't want people, traveling from South Carolina, or large mass people traveling from South Carolina. I guess a hot spot for COVID-19 to play in Washington D.C. So a messy situation out of the MEAC, who would have had a playoff bid had D.C. lawmakers not made that law.
Yeah, that's interesting. I did not know that. And they couldn't find a neutral site or anything, or was that against the rules too?
I think so too. I think it's just they had hot spots that
they can't play at all. If they can't play in DC, they can't play at all. That makes sense.
Or just hot spots they couldn't travel to.
If you're already gonna do that, yeah. Man, it's yeah, I'm not a big fan of these automatic bids, all of them. And I don't know, you could kind of make the same argument you can for the NFL playoffs, and that if you make a rule that, we shouldn't have this just because the AFC South is terrible. Well, remember back in the early 2010s when the NFC West was the laughing stock of the NFL, and now they're maybe the best division in football. So it evens itself out eventually. It's just tough with these smaller schools and 10 automatic bids. But then again, it's not really an issue usually because there's 14 at-large bids typically, and we're reducing it to 16 because of the shortened season and spring and COVID and all that. So I guess we're kind of nitpicking at it this year, but it's usually not too much of an issue. I will ask though, because I'm actually not sure about this myself. Is it like the 10 highest seeds are the 10 automatic bids, and then like the rest are like kind of like wild cards, or is it? Because I'm genuinely not sure how that
Oh
works.
no, so like a conference, there's like conferences that are generally one bid conferences, like you see in basketball, that are generally perceived as weaker.
Okay.
The metrics don't
We could
favor them.
put Kennesaw State as like a 16 seed, or I guess a 4 seed.
Yeah, Kennesaw State. Yeah, they had a strong year at the Big South last year, so they're like one of the seeds, one of the teams that earned a bye, and you can earn multiple seeds per conference, and that's something that happens with the CAA regularly and the MVFC, Missouri Valley Football Conference. So
Okay. So hypothetically, we could see like an NDSU SDSU matchup, or like them being the top 2 seeds in the division.
yeah, it would be
Okay.
unlikely though in this playoff season.
Yeah, it'd be unlikely, but at least okay, I get what you're saying at least. Okay. Awesome. Yeah, because I wasn't sure on how that worked exactly. So yeah, like I said, we're kind of like looking at it this year and thinking it's unfair, but next year when we look at it and there's 24 teams, like I don't think we'll think much of it.
Yeah, so the playoff race, yeah, very interesting, and we'll see it really take shape these next 2 weeks. Jackson, what are your games to watch this week as we start to close?
We were going over them a little bit before the show, and they were like completely different from each other, which really shows like the diversity and depth of the weekend. Like if you haven't started, which hopefully if you're listening to this, you have, watching FCS football this spring, this is the weekend to do it, because this is the weekend things really start to get interesting. I've got Kennesaw State versus Monmouth and as my first game. Kennesaw State 4-0, Monmouth 2-0, first seed versus second seed in the Big South. It's going to be 1 Eastern on ESPN Plus this Saturday. My second game, Alabama, who's kind of untested, only 1-0, goes on the road to Jackson State. I mean, kind of been a disappointment this year, being 3-2 when everyone thought they were going to be invincible. That's 3 Eastern on ESPN. No plus at the end on the big boy ESPN. And then Southeastern Louisiana versus our at Nichols. Both teams are 3-2. Nichols coming off of a very disappointing loss. I've liked SC Louisiana for this year. I think they've had a great year. And that's 4 Eastern on ESPN Plus. Finally, we can't forget the Route 1 rivalry. Delaware on the road. Delaware State for the first time in its short, like 14-year history. 6 p.m. Eastern time, prime time on ESPN2.
Yeah, so very, very great games. And again, like a really diverse slate. Can't complain about that. And it seems like we have Football 365 with the Spring League talking about their summer schedule. I'm not sure if you caught that, Jackson, but
I did not. What's going on with the Spring League?
the Spring League just their schedule's going to start in early May and end in mid-June.
Really?
Yeah.
Right before like training camp and stuff heats up. So we'll
Yeah.
actually full year of football.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the thing COVID did for us.
Yeah.
And, okay, what are the odds? And we're getting off topic again, but like, if it weren't for like them wanting to like preserve their NFL players and like possible NFL talent going to FCS schools, they should just move the FCS to the spring, because more people are watching it. It's way more fun. And then put all the games on Saturday. And then when the XFL comes back, put all those games on Sunday. And just like, I don't know. I would like it a lot. But then all the Cade Johnsons and Trey Lances would opt out of like their last years, so, or transfer. So
I'm personally a fall guy. I mean, keep all college football in the fall, because it's just the economics with like paycheck games and everything like that,
Yeah, that's right. You could have a couple paycheck games in the fall though, so you stay warm. But and then pick off. Well, no, that wouldn't work with the NFL playoffs, but you could start like actually you could start right after the divisional round weekend and like on the conference championships. Well, no, that's the Senior Bowl weekend. Never mind.
So my games to watch this weekend are I got Lafayette Lehigh, the rivalry, 156 playing the most played rivalry in college football, not the oldest, as those teams did play twice a year for a while. And both teams are having an off season, really. Lafayette 1-1, Lehigh 0-2. Lehigh's only scored 3 points all year. But the defense is nice. And anytime you get a sense of normalcy with the rivalry ending the Patriot League regular season on that final weekend, it's good to see. After that, I got excuse me, blanked. I had these games ready. But after that, on Saturday, I got Davidson versus Presbyterian, as Davidson needs to win 2 more games to win the Pioneer Football League title and make their first playoff appearance and first postseason appearance since the 1969 Tangerine Bowl against Toledo. On Sundays when things heat up, I think, because you have 2 conference deciding games. You have Murray State, Jacksonville State. Oh, sorry, and I forgot to mention networks there for those 2 games. So ESPN Plus at 12:30 is the rivalry, Lafayette Lehigh, and this ad would get out of the way. Jeez. And at 11 a.m. Eastern on ESPN Plus, a little bit of early kick, Davidson Presbyterian. And then if you go the next day, Sacred Heart Duquesne at 2 p.m. for the Northeastern Conference title. That's gonna decide a playoff berth there. So we'll probably have our first playoff berth decided on Sunday in Pittsburgh. And at 3 o'clock Eastern, Murray State, Jacksonville State. And again, we mentioned how Murray State's on the cusp of an at-large. This is a must-win for them. And for Jacksonville State, maybe a must-win, but I can see them getting in with 8 wins because while they would have 3 losses, they do have 8 wins, more than a lot of other teams. Granted, not many of those wins are impressive wins, but we'll see. And I also forgot another game on Saturday, as before you know it, before anyone even realized, Mercer is a game off in the SoCon, and they're playing East Tennessee State at 6 p.m. Eastern. So if Mercer wins the rest, as East Tennessee State is in second place in the SoCon, if Mercer wins their next 2 games and VMI somehow loses to 1-9 Citadel, then Mercer's in the playoffs the first time ever. So a playoff scenario to look at. They need help though. But again, a really great slate of games. And also shout out to Buchanan reaching their first postseason game in 86 years. Really great story out there in Lewisburg. And also a good story for me. Good omen for me because, some droughts are ending. Maybe my drought will end. My girlfriend drought will end.
That is the longest streak that we have on this show.
Oh goodness.
Man, yeah, it's like we said, it's gonna be one of those Saturdays where I know I'm gonna get off from work and have 2 TVs and my laptop open because there's just a lot going on this week. If you want some free money, this isn't an ad. Go ahead and bet on Delaware State. They are a 27-point underdog on the line. So go ahead and put a little money on Delaware State, on the Hornets. I'm not doing it, so don't blame me because if you lose and take my advice. But man, a 27-point dog, that is just disrespectful. Man, I don't know. How do you feel about that, Omar?
I kind of feel it's warranted, Jackson, because we talked about how lopsided this rivalry is.
Yeah, but 27 points,
an average score of 37-11 in these games.
But yeah, I don't know. I think that's just kind of disrespectful. So we'll see. We'll see how that.
I think if anyone's the real deal out of the CAA, it's Delaware, because Delaware beat Stony Brook, or they beat Maine 37-0 in their first game, a solid Maine team. They beat Stony Brook 31-3. They've been the most dominant out of anyone in the CAA, and I think that spread it's very warranted. But if you're a gambling person, follow Jackson's advice, because I too am a fan of betting against large spreads.
And then I've also, if you're going to take a second bet, maybe a little parlay this week, go ahead and put the over on Incarnate Word in Northwestern State. Northwestern State 0-5. They're 11th in the Southland Conference. Incarnate Word, Cameron Ward's coming off of back-to-back 6 touchdown games. They're second in the Southland. The points are the total over under 66.5. I like the over on that. I like a blowout win by Incarnate Word. Welcome to the over.
I mean, the Demons are plucky. The Northwestern State Demons are plucky. We saw it with Nicholls State and Sam Houston State last week, but I
Yeah,
do like the over. I like the over
yeah.
in general, but I think it's going to be closer than you think, Jackson.
Like 40, do you think like it'll be like let me do some math, 41-21 or 42-21?
I'm going to go like 52-21. Like not horrible, but
So like over. Okay.
yeah, definitely
Like,
over.
I'm going to go with 48-17. It's going to look really bad. Yeah, okay. That's 65. So we're still over. 48-17 is my score prediction for that.
Wait, wasn't it over 66?
I thought it was 62.5. The over under is you're right.
51-17. We'll say you said 51-17.
Right. I remember I'm not terrible at math, I promise. I just what the
You said 51-17, Jackson. Don't worry.
Okay, cool. You can edit that out, right?
Well, we'll add some automated voice. We'll add an automated voice to that.
Or just add, if you can't crop it out, just add Gronky's not bothering us today. It's great.
Yeah.
So awesome. All right. Well, before we get too off topic, do a little parlay on that and enjoy some awesome college football this weekend. Don't watch golf. Have a life. Don't watch golf.
Yeah, I think that's good advice. Even though Masters, if you're gonna watch Masters, watch hole 16 with Vern Lundquist on the call. It's poetic, and spring is here when Vern's on the back nine.
You hit my weak spot with Vern. I miss CBS, but awesome. All right. Well, I won't talk to you next week. We'll probably talk right after this. We'll watch college football this week.
Yeah, and until next time, peace, love, and soul, everyone.